Sampling. We all know that sampling plays a vital role in carrying out any marketing research study. In this lesson, we will explain sampling, various sampling terms, describe sampling process, and analyze sample size. After going through this presentation, you should be able to explain sampling, describe sampling terms, analyze sampling process, understand types of sampling, discuss sample size. Let us begin with defining. Sampling is the process of selecting a small number of elements from a larger defined target group of elements, such that the information gathered from the small group will allow judgments to be made about the larger groups. An element is the unit about which information is collected. The type of unit considered in any marketing research study would depend upon the objectives of the study. A properly designated population must be defined in terms of elements, sampling units, extent, and time. A sampling unit is that element or elements considered available for selection in some stage of the sampling process. Sampling frame is a list of population elements, like people, companies, houses, cities, etc., from which units to be sampled can be selected. It is difficult to get an accurate list. Sample frame error occurs when certain elements of the population are accidentally omitted or not included on the list. A study population is the aggregation of elements from which the sample is actually drawn. First step is to define the population. Population is defined in terms of elements, sampling units, extent, and time. Next, identify the sampling frame. Example, you want to learn about scooter owners in a city. The RTO will be the frame which provides you names, addresses, and the types of vehicles possessed. Next, specify the sampling unit. Individuals who are to be contacted are the sampling units. If retailers are to be contacted in a locality, they are the sampling units. Next, selection of sampling method. Probability or non-probability method is used. Next, determine the sample size. This means we need to decide how many elements of the target population are to be chosen. Next, specify the sampling plan. A sampling plan should clearly specify the target population. Improper defining would lead to wrong data collection. Next, select the sample. This is the final step in the sampling process. Based on the above parameters, sample respondents may be selected to collect the data for the purpose of research. There are two methods of sampling. First is probability sampling and second is non-probability sampling. In a probability sample, every unit in the population has equal chances for being selected as a sample unit. In the non-probability sampling, the units in the population have unequal or negligible, almost no. Simple random sampling is a method of probability sampling in which every unit has an equal non-zero chance of being selected. Systematic random sampling is a method of probability sampling in which the defined target population is ordered and the sample is selected according to position using a skip interval. Stratified random sampling is a method of probability sampling in which the population is divided into different subgroups and samples are selected from each. Then, non-probability methods. Convenience sampling relies upon convenience and access. Judgment sampling relies upon belief that participants fit characteristics. Quota sampling emphasizes representation of specific characteristics. And snowball sampling relies upon respondent referrals of others with like characteristics. Determining sampling design means how many completed questionnaires do we need to have a representative sample. Generally, the larger the better, but that takes more time and money. Answer depends on how different or dispersed the population is, desired level of confidence and desired degree of accuracy. An optimum sample in survey is one which fulfills the requirements of efficiency, representativeness, reliability, and flexibility. The sample should be small enough to avoid unnecessary expenses and large enough to avoid intolerable sampling error. Now let's see how much you have learned till now. State whether the following statements are true or false. A probability sampling is a process in which every item of the population has an equal probability of being chosen. False. Sampling frame is the list of elements from which the sample is actually drawn. True. Simple random sample procedure in which simple random sub-samples are drawn from within different strata that are more or less equal on some characteristic. False. Before we end, let us briefly revise what we have studied so far. Sample is a representative of population. Census represents cent% of population. The most important factors distinguishing whether to choose sample or census is cost and time. There are 7 steps involved in selecting the sample. There are 2 types of sample: probability sample and non-probability sample. Probability sampling includes random sampling, stratified random sampling, systematic sampling, cluster sampling, multi-stage sampling. Random sampling can be chosen by lottery method or using random number table. Samples can be chosen either with equal probability or varying probability. Random sampling can be systematic or stratified. In systematic random sampling, only the first number is randomly selected. Then, by adding a constant k, remaining numbers are generated. In stratified sampling, random samples are drawn from several strata, which have more or less the same characteristics. In multi-stage sampling, sampling is drawn in several stages.